My name is Hamic, and I'm presenting my thesis on the sacralization of politics in American society. Religion has long been a foundational aspect of America's governing principles. In his renowned farewell address, former President George Washington argues that of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. While Washington himself may have leaned toward deism, it is evident that he considered religion a fundamental component to both the social and the political realms. He believed that, since the people would rule in America, it was necessary for morality to serve as a check to their desires and ambitions. The former president later notes that morality cannot be maintained without religion. He claimed that religion serves as the foundation for virtue, and that it cannot be substituted by reason alone. In recent years, America has seemingly shifted away from her religious underpinnings. According to news source USA Today, Americans are becoming less religious, leaving organized faiths, and identifying instead as individuals who believe in nothing in particular. However, Christian apologist G.K. Chesterton would argue that an individual always puts his faith in something. He claims that when a man stops believing in God, he doesn't believe in nothing, he believes in anything. While America is a secularizing society, it is not an irreligious society. Organized faith has been dethroned, but politics has taken its place. In Animal Farm by George Orwell, animals join forces and overthrow the human farmer who oppressed them. Upon deposing the man, the animals resolve to follow a set of moral ideals. These are outlined as the 7 commandments. The commandments emphasize the animals' equality and freedom from servitude. The animals are filled with hope and pride in their self-government and faithfully follow the regulations set forth by their founders. As the novel progresses, the pigs take over the leadership of the farm. They gradually become more powerful and begin to use their influence to benefit themselves at the expense of other animals. The laws governing what is right are sacrificed by the pigs' pursuit of what works politically. Eventually, the pigs alter the commandments in order to fit their political agendas. This alteration is gradual, as the pigs merely add a few words to each commandment and convince the other animals that they remembered the initial phrases incorrectly. At the conclusion of the novel, however, the original moral ideals of the animals are lost completely, and with the commandments go their freedom and liberty. The story of Animal Farm is applicable to today's political environment. Rather than hold fast to preconceived moral principles, citizens are looking to their political affiliations and leaders for their standards and ideals. This shift in society's moral foundation has widespread detrimental effects, from an increase in political polarization to the devaluing of absolute truth. According to Senator Ben Sasse, author Ezra Klein, and numerous other researchers, political polarization is at an all-time high in American society. This is because political affiliations are taking the place of religious teaching, which has long been the standard bearer for morality, in order to allow for collective preferences that were once viewed as unacceptable and sinful. These alterations to moral accuracy now supersede absolute truth, creating effects much like that of Animal Farm. Citizens view members of the opposing party as inherently wrong and intrinsically evil, leaving little room for mutual respect and decency. If allowed to continue at its current rate, this emotional polarization will destroy the nation as we know it. In the summer of 2025, numerous different unions and organizations called for a boycott of Independence Day in America. They claimed that there was no longer any freedom to observe in light of recent immigration protocols. On a day usually filled with patriotic celebrations, lasting until the early hours of the next morning, there would be a silent rebellion. No parties, no fireworks, no parades. Instead, citizens would spend the day indoors, withholding their money and their presents from the festivities. John Swartz, founder of the People's Union USA, advised individuals not to wave a flag for a country that no longer waves for you. Rather than focus on unifying the nation through patriotism and long-standing tradition, these organizations attempted to divide the nation even further in order to pursue their own agendas regarding illegal immigration. They concentrated on the success of their political party, ultimately exalting party over patriotism in their endeavor to publicize their views. Political violence and subversive protests have become normalized in American society. From the brutal murder of orator Charlie Kirk to the unprovoked assassination of Representative Melissa Hortman, insurrection and mutiny are becoming commonplace occurrences in America. Political affiliations are endorsing and even promoting these acts of violence for members of the opposing party. If America continues to dismiss these perfidious actions, then the political and social state of the nation will be in disrepair. The Democrat and Republican parties were originally formed to facilitate healthy debates and allow for equal representation. But how have the parties that were created to support American politics reduced themselves to pugnacious tribes that ceaselessly attempt to demonize their opponents by hurling insults and spreading lies? It is clear that the state of our political discourse is damaging the nation. The enmity in today's political environment is attributed to the moral role that has been assumed by politics. Political affiliations have replaced the religious compass of our founding fathers that once directed the course of America and her unmatched morality, a reality that is now ultimately destroying the nation. Religion is defined as a cause, principle, or set of beliefs that is held to with ardor and faith. It is a set of principles or ideologies that is arduously defended and adamantly espoused. Where some individuals believe religion to be a faith in the supernatural, this is not necessarily the case. Everyone has a religion. Everyone worships something. Everyone lives by faith. This idea may seem far-fetched, but consider this present-day reality. In America, political ideologies are the new religion, political leaders are worshipped, and faith is found through one's party. This sacralization of politics provides a method for constituents to rationalize violence. And unfortunately, this is nothing new. Think back to the Crusades in 1095. The Crusades were a series of wars fought between the Christians and the Muslims over control of the Holy Land. During the Crusades, mass murder, remorseless cannibalism, and vicious lootings became commonplace. Historians report that soldiers trudged through blood that reached their ankles in the aftermath of a siege. These wars were religiously motivated and were therefore seen as just sacrifices that were necessary for the greater good. In the same way that the Crusades were excused by many due to their moral motives, individuals today are dismissing cruelty and brutality when it is on the basis of their political party's ideologies. In other words, the ends do not justify the means. Where political affiliations strive to create new laws, promote social justice, and construct a better world, they often do so at the expense of politicians and constituents on the opposing side. This mindset is rationalized by the party's end goal of cultivating a brighter future and advancing the common good, similar to the way that the Crusades were vindicated through the motives of reclaiming a religious site and expanding Christianity. C.S. Lewis reiterates this concept, saying, "I think nearly all the crimes which Christians have perpetrated arise from this, that religion is confused with politics." As recently revealed by the Pew Research Center, organized religion is in decline. However, the desire for a meaningful identity remains. In a secularizing society, individuals are looking to certain substitutes to take the place of more orthodox faiths. The new belief in politics is an attempt to fill the gap that institutionalized religion left behind. Americans have not ceased to worship, they have shifted the recipient of that worship. Although it does so poorly, politics seems to be the greatest replacement religion of this secular age. It provides all that sinful human creatures desire. Many of these desires are actually innate cravings that are perfectly satisfied by Christianity. In a secular society, however, individuals must look to fulfill these cravings through other means. Citizens look to politics for salvation, fellowship, and purpose, though political associations offer a more personalized variation of the traditional religious doctrine. These quasi-religious politics claim to be a comprehensive framework that can explain one's purpose and fulfill his desires. And the greater one's zeal, the higher his status in this faith. In his book, The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, author and researcher Jonathan Haidt notes that individuals on either side of the aisle have differing moral views. Because citizens are increasingly looking to their political affiliations to determine their moral values, their principles are beginning to diverge. This, in turn, encourages hostility between constituents, as it has before between the Christians and the Muslims in the Crusades. Religion and politics have always had a conflicting relationship. The Independence Day protest was an example of the exaltation of a political party, but this veneration has been an issue since the early ages. In the time of Jesus, the Jews' ability to identify the Messiah was inhibited by their political expectations. Jesus, a relatively apolitical figure, explained that his kingdom was not of this world. Where the Jews anticipated a military leader to displace the Roman occupation in Judea, Jesus refused violence and desired to unite the Jews with God. While Christ possessed strong views of what society should look like, his vision for the renewal of his people was never a political push for power. Instead, he focused on personal salvation and rightness with God. The Zealots were a Jewish sect that aimed to forcefully restore God's rule over Israel. These individuals possessed a religious purpose, but utilized this motive to vindicate brutality. Where the Zealots sought to overthrow the Romans through violence and terrorism, Jesus looked to justify and sanctify his people through an act of undying love. Simon, a disciple of Christ, had strong affiliations with this radical Jewish party. Upon following Christ, however, Simon abandoned his political ties. He could not serve both God and politics. It is important to note that political involvement is not evil and should be encouraged within reason. It is when political faith supersedes God's law that it becomes perilous. The Zealots' focus shifted from restoring the Lord as King of Israel to securing political liberty. But figures such as Esther, David, and Nehemiah were able to use their political positions to free their people and carry out God's will. They did so by placing the will of God at the forefront of their minds, rather than by securing political power for their own agendas. On the journey to the New World, Governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, John Winthrop, reminded the Pilgrims that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story and a byword through the world. He noted that if Americans failed to succeed, they would be ridiculed by other nations and disrespected by all. Today, America is viewed unfavorably by nearly half the world. While studies show that individuals once believed American democracy should be emulated by other nations, this is no longer the case. Clearly, something changed. Citizens went from considering political involvement as a duty to one's country to viewing politics as an outlet for their frustrations. Constituents who once elevated chivalry and propriety now excuse violence and misconduct when it is performed by a member of their own party. These issues present a little-known fact. The devil's deception plays a crucial role in politics. Americans have, in fact, dealt falsely with their God. They have allowed the devil to creep in through the guise of political zeal. As C.S. Lewis states in a letter, the devil claims politics for his own, as almost the citadel of his power. Through an individual's preoccupation with political issues, the devil is able to divert them from Christ. The constant drama originating from politics serves as a distraction from spiritual fixations, and the divisiveness that political affiliations cause prevents fellowship and unity between individuals. In the Screwtape Letters, Lewis writes as a demon named Screwtape, who is tasked with guiding his nephew on how to deceive a human. Screwtape tells his nephew to ensure that meetings, movements, pamphlets, policies, causes, and crusades matter more to him than prayers and sacraments and charity, and he will be ours. I could show you a pretty cageful down here. Screwtape tells his nephew that many individuals have been deceived through politics and are now caged in hell. Through the character of Screwtape, Lewis warns against the religion of politics. As highlighted by Senator Ben Sasse in his book, Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal, America is experiencing an epidemic. He notes that we're richer and better informed and more connected, and unhappier and more isolated and less fulfilled. There is a crucial discrepancy here. Despite recent medical advancements, there has been a decrease in the average life expectancy of Americans. But what is the cause of this unprecedented issue? Loneliness. Scientists have begun to explore the effects of loneliness on the human brain, and the results are consistent. Studies suggest that one lonely day exacts the same toll on the body as smoking an entire pack of cigarettes. And in America, 52 million people experience loneliness. Senator Ben Sasse argues that this feeling of isolation causes people to form anti-tribes, which are groups that form due to a common hatred rather than a common goal. In their desperation to find community, Americans have begun to replace meaningful companionship with shared resentment. Where churches and local communities promote fellowship in the United States, political parties stimulate an attitude of hostility while lacking the ability to unify their members in a meaningful way. Studies show that individuals who attend church regularly are nearly 50% less likely to feel lonely or isolated. With regular church attendance in decline, citizens are looking to their political parties to fill the gap. The decline of religion in America is ultimately to blame for the increase in political polarization. It has been stated that politics is inherently tied to an individual's belief system, and that it is, therefore, impossible to prevent politics from becoming a religion. Religion is generally considered foundational to one's identity, as individuals base their beliefs and opinions on their religion. This fact, however, only serves to highlight the importance of the separation of religion and politics. It is true that politics is a means of representing one's belief system, but politics should never be the belief system. An individual's identity encompasses many aspects of his life, and politics should be a facet of one's identity rather than the foundation of it. While making choices based on one's identity is often considered a natural part of decision-making, author and researcher Ezra Klein found that one's political affiliation now supersedes all other identities. In his book, Why We're Polarized, Klein notes that one is more likely to refine his other beliefs and opinions in order to fit his political sympathies than he is to allow his identities to contradict each other. If one's morals disagree with his party's ideologies, he will modify his morals. No other establishment claims this amount of authority over an individual's thoughts, opinions, and emotions. How then can an individual separate his political standpoints from his core identity? One must invest in building an identity rooted in Christ and avoid relying on politics as a central aspect of his or her person. In his book, Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis writes the following: "The devil always sends errors into the world in pairs of opposites, and he always encourages us to spend a lot of time thinking which is the worse. You see why, of course? He relies on your extra dislike of the one error to draw you gradually into the opposite one. But do not let us be fooled. We must keep our eyes on the goal and go straight through between both errors. In America, every individual is presented with a choice. The choice to invest in politics and contribute to society, or to disregard politics and avoid conflict at the expense of one's beliefs. However, as C.S. Lewis so masterfully explains, Christians must remain focused on their true purpose, to love, enjoy, and obey God, and utilize this mindset to make decisions for the sake of Christ's kingdom. Thank you. I would now like to take questions from the judges.
I'll go first, I guess. Do you think part of the reason we see this is due to the church abdicating its role in society to the government in some of these instances? So it's easier to tell people how to live or legislate how they live rather than show them how to live?
Yes, sir. That's a great question, and I definitely think that plays a big part in this. One of the things I looked into a lot was how the church can combat this exaltation of politics. And I think a big part of it is to lead by example, and it's to encourage its members to, in anything they do, to interact with, it could be politics, it could be their family, it could be anything, but to do so with a spirit of love and humility and to ultimately glorify Christ in all that they do. And so I definitely think that plays a big part in it, and I think the best thing that Christians can do is lead by example.
I'm going to ask my question, but you answered it already, but just so that you did an outstanding job detailing this timely and relevant topic. And you named some likely causes of it, but I guess I'm walking away from this, like, what do we do? What do I do to, what do my family can do to begin to fix the issues that you laid out so beautifully? And you may not be able to answer that, but I'm satisfied with what you shared with him, with my question.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I do think, like I said, lead by example. Even if you don't agree with someone, even if you think their ideas are kind of crazy, you can still show them love and you can still be empathetic. That does not mean that you have to agree with them, because I think as Christians, there are some very firm truths that we have to hold to. But it does mean that we can be kind and caring towards them and show them the love of Christ.
No, I'll go. Very good job.
Thank you.
I guess I want to ask a question. Do you think that the American political experience is well, you used the term sacralization, so it seems to me you're saying we're in decline from a prior period.
Yes, sir.
When we had less sacralization, more religion. But part of that, would you say, is maybe due to the door being opened wider to bigger more stakeholders. We have people of different backgrounds. Our Congress used to be very monolithic and very closed. Like even the Senate an individual couldn't vote on the senators, as you know, until late in the 19th century. So we had more voters. We had more voters of different faiths,
yes,
different
sir.
backgrounds. And so that melting pot of the voting is reflected to a large degree in our leadership.
Yes, sir.
And so, just because we're not the same from a religious perspective as the original Congresses were, perhaps, why is it, I seem to think that you find that the multi-faiths, the multitude of views is not as sound as it was 200 years ago. Why do I take that from what you say?
Yes, sir. I think that's a good point, and I'm definitely not saying that people who have very different opinions, people who have different religions, that's not a bad thing at all. I think what I'm saying is that as of right now, people are placing their identity in their political party, and it's very hard to separate them from that. And so rather than in the past, your identity would have been in your religion, or even if you're not religious, in your family or in something else, you're instead looking to your political party to fill that gap, if that makes sense. And so the issue is not people having different religions by any means. It's that people are exalting their political party and they're making it this group that they have to fit into, and that's part of themselves. So if someone attacks their political party, they're attacking themselves. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Allie, proud of you. I guess in one sense, to make it very personal and practical, you're a member of a church.
Yes, sir.
Where have you seen this done well in the church, and where have you seen this done poorly in the church? If that's the answer, that the church has negated that space and therefore it's been filled by the political realm.
Yes, sir.
Where have you seen it done poorly? Where have you seen it done well?
Not really in our church specifically, but I think Christians as a whole. There was a time period not too long ago where if you're a Democrat, you could be a Christian. If you're a Republican, you could be a Christian. And you could go to church with members of different political parties, but ultimately, you're not arguing about that. You're there to worship the Lord, and that faith would transcend all other political parties. I think the issue now is that a lot of people who do identify as Christian are very firm in their political beliefs, I guess, which is not a bad thing, but they're still exalting politics. And I think a big part of that might be to do with cultural changes, but I still think that it can be resolved by Christians instead of meeting members of the opposing party with hate or demonizing them or anything like that, but to show the love of the Lord to them. And so while I haven't seen that in our church specifically, I definitely think Christians as a whole who are involved in politics have begun to exalt politics, and I think that's a big issue.
Do you think there's a role for the pastor in preaching about politics?
I do not. I do not think pastors should preach about politics from the pulpit. One thing being, I believe churches would lose their tax-exempt status if they do so, but also because I think if a pastor mentions a political issue, that can be very divisive for the congregation, and I think the ultimate purpose of the church, it's the body of Christ, and so you could disagree on political issues, but you love the Lord, and that's why you're there. And so I think that preaching from the pulpit would be very divisive for the congregation, and I just think it would be detrimental as a whole.
So in today's world, we're seeing some blips of Christianity reemerging. We see football teams, colleges, Christianity surging. In our government, we've seen some resurgence of Christianity. But we also know the other side of our world, which is scary and dark. Where do you see us going from here?
How to resolve the issue, or just?
How to, not necessarily resolve, but do you think there is hope for a balance?
Yes, ma'am. I definitely think there is. I think that, like I kind of mentioned before, that placing your identity in your political party is the biggest issue of why it's so divided. And so actually in one of the books I read, it was called Why We're Polarized, there was a study conducted where Democrats and Republicans spent a week together having conversations, getting to know each other. And they conducted a survey at the beginning of that week and then at the end. And they found that after the week was over, after they had interacted with each other and built a foundation of trust, they were much more likely to be open to each other's perspectives, to be respectful in conversation, things like that. And so I think if we can get that on a larger scale, that would definitely help as well. Okay, if there are no further questions, thank you.